1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 18 through 20. The passage reads as follows. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. His mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year, when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and would say, "May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for whom the gift she made to the Lord." And then they would return to their home. Now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. This is the word of Luke 2, verses 41 through 52. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended, they started to return. The boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was with a group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he had said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth, and was obedient with them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And so it has come to this. It is nearly over. It is finally done. Praise God that we are at the end of 2021. Sigh of relief. I feel it. Who knew that the last 12 months of this year would be just a lousy sequel to the year before? Okay, maybe not everyone. Comparatively speaking, I think that we all could say, even though it wasn't very stellar, 2021 was a better year than 2020. Although in its defense, 2020 did not set the bar very high. But a lot of us this time of year tend to look back at the highlights and the lowlights of what went on in the last 12 months. And a lot of media outlets will help you do this, just so you can reflect on how bad or good the last 12 months were. For example, if you were a radio listener like I was back in the day, you used to listen to a guy by the name of Casey Kasem. And Casey Kasem would have his weekly show, American Top 40, on the radio every weekend. But this particular weekend was special because he would count down the top 100 songs of the last year. How many of you listened to that? All right, so a couple of us. All right, good. Wasn't just me. But there are a lot of other media outlets that will do the same thing. Usually when it gets closer to New Year's, they will play or give a list of the top news items of the year. I'm sure if you looked at those lists, they would contain COVID, vaccination, COVID, and someone got elected. I think that's about how the list is going to work. One of those major news sources is a periodical that's based out of New York City. It was first published in March 1923. Now, the main goal of this periodical was to tell the news through people. And their magazine covers usually denoted a picture of a single person, at least up until the late 1960s. Their reports would focus on the people of the news, their backgrounds, their history, in order for their readers to get a full story of why these people are who they are, and for some reasons behind their motives of what they do, and perhaps some inspiration as to what obstacles these people might have had to overcome. The magazine was published weekly, but has since gone to having issues printed every 2 weeks. Over the years, its publications coined many words that have been added to the English vocabulary, such as socialite, guesstimate, televangelist, pundit, and tycoon. Anyone want to take a guess what that magazine is? Oh, good guesses. What's not Life? No. Nope. Time magazine. You're getting there. Lots to pull on that one too. But anyway, as of 2012, Time magazine had a circulation of 3.3 million people, making it the 11th most circulated magazine in the United States. second behind another similar periodical called People. And if you're an avid reader of Time magazine, you know that this week, every year, Time magazine publishes and chooses its Person of the Year. Now, originally this was known as the Man of the Year, then it evolved to the Man or the Woman of the Year, and up until 1999 when the politically correct pundits said, and then they changed it to Person of the Year. This week, this magazine chooses a person, a group, or an idea, or an object that, according to the magazine, for better or worse, has done most to influence the events of the last year. It is a highly anticipated and accredited title that many have had over the magazine's history. For example, since this list began, every serving president of the United States have had this title, with the exception of Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, and Gerald Ford. The only president that received the title before he was elected was Dwight Eisenhower. Franklin Roosevelt is the only president to have received the title 3 times. Before 1999, only 4 women had held this title as individuals. Wallace Simpson in 1936, Queen Elizabeth in 1952, and Corazon Aquino in 1986. The group American Women were recognized as a group in 1975. In 1982, the first inanimate object was named and given the title. Anyone want to guess what that was? The computer. The computer was given the title Machine of the Year in 1982. And believe it or not, you have also been given this title. For the magazine dubbed the class of unnamed people, you, as People of the Year in 2006. So with all that and looking over the last 12 months, anyone want to take a guess at who the Person of the Year was this year?
Elon Musk.
Very good. Someone reads Time.
It was on the news.
Was it on the news? All right, I don't watch
Morning
it.
news.
That's right. I have a whole sermon on news today, and I don't watch it hardly at all. But yes, Elon Musk. But rest assured, this morning's message is not about Elon Musk. I bring you all this history to say this, because a lot of times it is important to look at someone's upbringing in order to fully understand who that person is, or their way in that particular time in history. And as we look at our Bible passages today, they do just that. So first we look at Samuel, where we read today from the second chapter of 1 Samuel. We read verses 18 to 20 and 26. Now Samuel, in his lifetime, was considered to be the prophet to the kings. And then at this time in the Bible was a period of transition between the judges that started in Moses' time and the kings that eventually ended up and continued to rule the day. So how did Samuel get to be in such a predominant position? Well, for that we have to go back to the beginning of the book of 1 Samuel. And for that, this morning, Bible basics for your brain. So as we look at the first chapter of 1 Samuel, we are introduced to a man called Elkanah. I never pronounced that right. Elkanah. Now Elkanah had 2 wives. One was named Peninnah, and the other was named Hannah. Now Elkanah loved Hannah more than Peninnah. However, it was Peninnah that had all the kids to this point, when Hannah didn't have any. And that was a big thing back in the day. As archaic as it may seem in this day and age, back in the Bible time we're looking at, it was important for women to bear children, as it was seen as their point, or as their proof of life. If they didn't bear any children, they were seen as less than or unworthy. Not helping matters any, but if you look in the book of 1 Samuel, Peninnah has continually been causing Hannah stress by provoking her on her purpose until Hannah usually ends up breaking down in tears. And me and my demented mind, I picture some scene out of Jerry Springer. Now, Elkanah comes on the stage, gives his sob story. Hannah comes in, gives her a sob story. They give it a hot story. Then all of a sudden, and here comes the second wife. And she comes out. You know, you're laughing, you're smiling. You know what I'm talking about. Now, annually, this family would be making their sacrifice to the judge. And at this time, that judge was named Eli. And one of those excursions, we see Hannah, again breaking down in tears, this time outside of the temple, when she would go to pray to be able to bear children. And she makes a vow specifically in chapter 1, verse 11, where she cries out to the Lord, "O Lord Almighty, if you would only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but to give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will be used on his head." Well, lo and behold, when they returned from their trip to the temple, Elkanah and Hannah do their marital thing, and lo and behold, the Lord opens up her womb. She is conceived, 9 months later, she births a son, which she names Samuel, as it says in verse 20, because I asked the Lord for him. So the next annual excursion comes around to the temple, and Hannah stays back with the child Samuel. We look at chapter 1, verse 22. Hannah says, after this boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always. Now, although this passage presents itself as God's grand plan, and it is, many of you know, if you've ever traveled with children, what it is like to travel with children. It is a bear. Even if it's just mom and dad and the kid, your car is packed full of stuff in order to take this child and make him happy. Because if he's not happy, then most of the time, the kid will have a crying fit in wherever you are, say the grocery store, where you know they're just other mothers and parents, they're holding a cell phone at you, ready to tape whatever it is, ready to post it online with the baby screaming and the mom trying to calm it down with a hashtag bad parents. However, the next year, this is what they do. They take Samuel to the king. They have him live with the king in his household, therefore fulfilling the promise that Hannah made to God when Samuel was conceived. So now we get to chapter 2, where we see the judge Eli. He has 2 sons named Hophni and Phinehas. Now the 2 sons were priests, however, they were probably not the most upright priests that you would expect. Chapter 2, verse 12 says, they were wicked men who had no regard for the Lord. And the chapter continues on how these 2 sons pretty much took whatever they wanted for the people with no regard whatsoever. So from that scene, you can probably imagine how the world is. Probably not unsimilar to like today. I could equate to those. You could probably equate the 2 sons to the people doing the smash and grab robberies out in California. They take what they wanted whenever they wanted because they were who they were. However, in this instance, of course, we know who these criminals are and who are perpetrating their acts, and for some reason, they're getting away with it. However, in the midst of all that is going on in the temple, Hannah keeps her word to God, and Samuel follows in those footsteps. So we look again at chapter 2, verse 18. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each mother his year would make him a little robe, and took it to him when she and her husband went to offer their annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and Hannah, saying, may the Lord give you children by this woman, to take the place of the one she prayed for, and gave to the Lord. And then we jump to verse 21, where it says, then the Lord was gracious to Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now, if we keep reading in the books of 1 and 2 Samuel, we see that Samuel's righteous ways and godly understanding from even the short time of the upbringing that Hannah had with him, and they continued to be blessed by God and all that Samuel did. And now this is granted several more sermons that I'm able to give you this morning, which I don't have time for. But if you focus on the world at that time, being as evil and corrupt as it was, and what Hannah and Samuel continued to accomplish by keeping their faith in the Lord, they continued to be faithful in the Lord in spite of all that. Now that brings us to our little sermon within the sermon this morning. When our focus is truly on God, it will truly be God who continues to bless us, not only here, no matter what's going on in the world, but in the hereafter. So now fast forward to our New Testament reading this morning, which we pick up in Luke, where we left off on Christmas Eve. Now we reflected on the birth of Christ in Luke chapter 2. Now we're looking at Jesus as a young lad, 12 years old, as the passage says. Again, this book of Luke is not the only book of the Bible that reflects on not only the specifics of the birth of Jesus, but now we're looking at Jesus as a young boy. So this gives us a little more insight as to how Jesus was growing up, and it doesn't give any less credibility to what Jesus was as an adult. So here's the scene, and you can try to picture this in your heads as I read along, beginning at verse 41. Every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the feast, according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Okay, stop right here. You're picturing this in your head. Mom and Dad are traveling back from Jerusalem, and they forgot something. But what could that possibly be? She's there. Family's back there. Oh yeah! Son of God. Okay, now if this was any of us, CYS would be at our doorstep before we even got home, right? And contrary to rumors, this is not the storyline that they took to make the movie Home Alone. mean, granted, I get it. I misplaced certain things. I misplaced my keys, my cell phone. Before I got these bifocals, I had reading glasses all over the house. But you have to ask yourself, how could something like this happen? Yes, we are the judgmental parents. We have the phones just as well as everyone else with that we think are looking at us all the time. But if you've ever traveled with a kid, you know what it's like. Now, have my kids ever got lost? Absolutely. I'm not 100% perfect, nor do I claim to be. But we continue on with the story. Verse 45. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem and looked for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts. Okay, so now you can feel the frustration level starting to go in mom and dad. Amen? After Joseph and Mary left Jerusalem, they realized they were missing something. You know, the child of God we talked about earlier. So they returned to Jerusalem. Then it takes them another 3 days before they find him again. So now, Mary and Joseph have at least 3 days of frustration growing within them, trying to find the child that they left behind. And they finally find him eventually just sitting around with the teachers and the preachers of the day, listening to them and asking them questions. Now to add to this drama, verse 47 says, as mom and dad come up on the scene, Jesus is there with the preachers and teachers. Everyone who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. Okay, so the kid is borderline genius talking to all these adults. Then mom and dad. Now remember again, 3 days worth of anger and frustration trying to find their child. Son, why have you treated us like this? Verse 48. Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. If you've ever been a parent, you could probably feel what mom and dad are going through, right? It doesn't matter what this kid says, you're not going to pay attention to all. You're just so angry and tired and at this child that he did what he did, right? And I have to shake my head at this a little bit because I've also been in this situation when a kid comes back with an answer better than one I even thought of. Verse 49, when Jesus replies, why were you searching for me, he asked. Don't you know that I had to be in my Father's house? Oh, you got me on that one, son. What am I supposed to do? But again, mom and dad are so frustrated, he could have had $1 million lottery ticket in his hand, and you still want to take him by his ear and grab him right to the car. So I get that. My kids have done that to me plenty of times. Remember, everyone else was in awe of this 12-year-old kid at what he was saying and doing. And sometimes I look back on my parenting and cannot believe, in spite of all that I have done, that my kids have turned out the way they have. What it's like to raise a child, or more than one child. And some things we've had to go through with our own kids, but then try to picture if you had to be the parents of the Son of God. I think I had it pretty easy, to be honest with you. But God continued to give them what they needed to do in order to what they had to do. Verse 51 says, then he was Jesus, went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. So Jesus was obedient to his parents. But the mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with men. Again, here we see the parents making and honoring their commitment to God, to raise their children in a godly fashion. And we know the stories of 2 stories of the Bible this morning, how those children came out. One became a prophet to the kings. One became the king of kings. And so, it has come to this. Now granted, we read about 2 success stories in the Bible of how parents can influence their kids in following God's word. But even in the lives of those children, those parents at some point in their lives had to give up their children and had to give them up to God and allow God to lead them into the lives that they are to live. And up to that point, it was those parents to get them to that point and be the best examples of God, how God wanted them and wants us to live. And sometimes that works out well. A lot of times it doesn't. But we as Christian brothers and sisters cannot give up on that promise we made to God when we give our children to God in the first place. Because if we give up, most likely the children will too. If we don't give up, we're at least giving them the fighting chance they need. And no matter what the world is like outside of our home, we have to continue to show our kids, as well as our friends and our families alike, that Jesus continues to be the way, and Jesus continues to be the truth, And Jesus continues to be with us in good times, and Jesus continues with us to be in the bad times. And that overall, that Jesus is still the light of the world to all those who come and believe in him. Because it is Jesus that continues to make the promise to us that he gave us when he gave up his life on that cross. And even if our kids or our friends or our family members make those wrong decisions, we as Christian brothers and sisters have to continue to show them that we will not give up on them. Because it is our Savior Jesus that never gave up on us. Now, we may never be Time Magazine's Person of the Year. We may never have our face on a Wheaties box. We may never make one of the top news stories of the year or sing one of the top 100 songs of the year. A catchphrase I like to use, and feel free to use it among yourselves, is, I will probably never be an American Idol, but I refuse to be Americanly idle. So therefore, I leave you this morning with the words we read before from Colossians 3, verses 15 to 17. Let the peace of Christ rule in you richly. Rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And this is what Jesus wants us, and this is what Jesus calls us to do. Do that, and the rest of your life, and whatever happens in the afterlife, everything else will fall into place. Just be patient. It's going to happen. God has got this. It's going to happen.